Right now, everyone is talking about what AI can do. Almost nobody is talking about the person standing in front of a tired team saying, you're exhausted and I need you to change again. That's the actual work. And my guest today does it better than anyone I know. Diana Mohan is the Executive Director of Transformation and Change at Seneca Polytechnic. Her career runs through Deloitte and PwC, and today her work sits right at the center of organizational strategy, AI adoption, and the future of work. If you're new here, this is the Impact List. Hit subscribe so you don't miss who's coming next. Diana is on my list because of who she was to me long before this conversation. When I moved my family to Calgary and barely knew a soul, she reminded me you can find your people anywhere. She finds the human in the middle of the exhaustion every time, and she did it for me. In fact, she does it now for entire teams. In this one, Diana gets into why people don't actually resist change. They resist the change they don't understand. How she moved a frightened team from, this is going to take my job, to this can make my work better. Why being right was never enough, and the belief her mother gave her that still drives how she leads today. This one's close to my heart. Let's get into it. Diana, I'm so excited to have you on the show today and get our listeners the opportunity to hear a little more about you. Before we get into it, tell me one thing this week that gave you pause or made you smile.
Well, Laurie, I am in chaos at the moment with 3 young boys. And so we had a rare moment the past few nights where the boys were sleeping, we were putting on a movie or a show, and I paused to reflect on how crazy how life has come together. Where 10, 15, 20 years ago, if you were to tell me this is the life I've created, the energy around me, I would be shocked. And as cheesy as it is, the idea of what once was your ceiling is now your floor totally kind of resonates. And so every so often when I get that rare moment of quiet, I really steep in gratitude to just say, wow, like I can't believe this is what we've created and how far we've come. And I feel very, very large amounts of gratitude for that. So that will be my moment of pause.
Oh, I totally hear you. My oldest, he's been away for the last almost 4 weeks, and your brain just, you're like, oh my gosh, I have more space in here. That
Yeah.
I am not running after 2 kids all the time doing work. You're like, wow, it is wild when you get to sit back and get some of that, just that space to think and reflect. Parenting takes up a large chunk of my brain as well.
Huge, huge.
And it's a really great, it's like perfect segue into why I want to tell you why you're sitting here, because it isn't only the work. And so I want to take us back a few years. So when I moved, we didn't really know anybody when we moved to Calgary, in 2018 at this point. And you were the person who reminded me that you can find your humans anywhere, even when you're far from home. And I remember we were both deep into it back then. We're trying to figure out how to balance motherhood and that workaholic nature that we had so ingrained in us. And it was so wonderful to kind of have somebody on the opposite end of the phone to be like, yes, this is what I'm facing too.
Yeah, I
And
always loved our chats. It always felt like home to be able to connect with another mom and someone who understood the world of consulting and work and life and going into that new chapter. It was so nice having you there, Lori. I'm very lucky to have met you.
true to the work of who you are at your core. And it's what struck me when I was starting to get ready for our conversation today is that's exactly what you do now, right? You find the human in the middle of the exhaustion. You do that at work. You do it for the variety of folks in your network. And you did it for me when I had so exhausted, so depleted, had nothing left to give. And again, you do that for whole teams of people when you have to take them through change. And that's really what I want to spend our time on today. Not necessarily just the technology in the work that you do. You do a lot of tech transformation, but the people on the other side of it, the way you've always led by finding the human first. And so when we think about that, obviously on a more broader scale, because as I said, it's so ingrained in who you are. Right now, I understand kind of in the current world of what you're working on and what you're interested in, You lead a lot of AI transformation, and you do a lot of this work in more of a public institution, public sector space. It is a sector wide disruption, right? Walk me through that. What do you actually have to work with in there when you've got the financial constraints, you've got the complexity of humans? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Love to. So I think there's a big misconception from leaders that people resist change. What I've experienced is that people resist change when they don't understand why it's happening to them. And right now, I'm in higher education. And in the sector, I don't think I've seen a sector gone through so much disruption so quickly. Let me give you an image of it. Government regulation changing, which has caused an insane amount of decline in international enrollment, which has led to a structural deficit across the sector, which has led to major business model transformations, which has led to restructuring. So it's like this wave of change that keeps rolling in and rolling in and rolling in. And oh, yeah, don't forget the big boulder, AI, as well as increasing student expectations, employee expectations. So it's just this volume of change that keeps happening. And people feel like they've lost control. They're just operating in constant uncertainty. And that's a feeling that, frankly, I mean, in layman's term, it sucks. And so recognizing that has been something that I've worked really hard on in figuring out where is that disconnect for understanding the why? Where is the disconnect where people feel like they've lost their agency and control? There was something I read a long time ago. I can't remember who wrote it or where I heard it from, but it's this framework where it says burnout is caused by a high level of uncertainty with a low level of control. And that's exactly what's happening, I find, across industry and sector, but particularly in some of the transformations I've been doing lately, that's the piece that's been most difficult.
It's really interesting as you're talking because when we talk about doing more with less, I'm not sure people think about the burnout effect of it. Like doing more with less isn't just necessary financial constraints or financial resources. It's actually working with really depleted people who have seen so much change. And I think sometimes building trust with people during change, guiding through major transformation, it's a completely different calculus when their own resources are so low. And so I'm curious about how do you help lead them when like there just isn't enough to give? So beyond financial constraints, as humans, these exhausted people who've seen change 900 times, how do you help to motivate them to get to the other side?
A big factor of what I do within my team is figuring out how to build a sense of agency and trust. So I don't ask the question of how do we help people get through this? I ask the question of how do I make people feel like they're leading this with me? And so I do everything from help them understand the problem we're trying to solve, co-creating solutions, getting their expertise, making sure they feel mattered in this kind of uncertain environment. Because the last thing I want them to feel, especially when working through a transformation, is irrelevance. And so we try really hard to make sure that we are doing this together. And I find that when you can lead together, you can show them how their expertise plays a part in creating a solution. That's when you drive momentum. And that's when you get energy from people to actually find a way to kind of pick up whatever is available and push through.
Yeah, and I so much of it is about the texture, right? So like give me one moment where you really felt like there was no easy answer. There was not enough funding to make sure that everybody could feel good. There wasn't enough time to get everybody in that right headspace. And you have to invent your way through that. What did that look like?
Well, I have to go to AI because that's my most recent kind of program and project. Like many organizations going through incredible financial constraint, but still needing and feeling the pressure of wanting to be AI ready, right? Enabling an AI ready future. And it wasn't the technology that was the hard part. It was creating momentum when we didn't have unlimited resources. And so figuring out that equation was probably the hardest part of the whole program. And so we really started small. We started with senior leadership. Rather than positioning AI as a technology that they had to figure out, we really focused on developing a capability building program. We code designed guiding principles. We thought about business priorities and how use cases with AI could actually solve those business priorities. My CHRO, who I love, she started asking questions in meetings, just daily meetings. Is this an opportunity for AI to help us out? And so we really moved the kind of mindset from, oh my God, this thing is going to take my job, to, I can find a creative way to make this work for me and my team and really shine. We celebrated constantly the small wins. We told our industry friends and partners. We worked with Josh Burson Company. We worked with McLean. And we celebrated the wins and not waited for perfection, which was so huge for the team in a moment of uncertainty and where you didn't feel like you had many wins. And so that was the piece that really started snowballing and getting this really big momentum for adopting AI. And I find once you get into the tinkering with it and you see that, oh, this thing can help me write an email. Oh, this thing can help me research. Oh, this thing can help me work on a workflow. It starts getting bigger and bigger, and the trust starts building up. And so pairing that with AI fluency and working together and getting people in on that journey, that was the best and most, I guess, cost-effective way to actually build momentum and drive this transformation within a very difficult, limited resource environment.
One of the things I've always loved about our conversations is you don't shy away from the more difficult parts of the conversation. And you haven't done that with AI either, right? Because you named it, the change you're asking for actually isn't a neutral change. For a lot of people, AI is the thing they are afraid of. You're asking people to adopt a very technology that is making some of them wonder if they're still going to be needed. Tell me a bit more about how you lead. What was something you saw in that process about how you lead somebody into that? You told us a little of the tactics, but tell me the story of how do you keep them feeling like they matter?
Oh, Laurie, it's actually really simple. I listen like nobody's business. I don't focus on selling the idea. I focus on understanding their challenge, because one of the things I learned early in my career is unless the change is part of someone's reality, it's not going to click. So a lot of the times there was a team that was extremely resistant because they were working with sensitive data. They were not sure how it actually works. They were so busy. How can we think about upskilling on this thing? They didn't understand it. Talking to them about some of their constraints and challenges and how they work was a great way to understand how we could kind of make AI relevant to their role and their specific situation. And having those conversations, they started putting in their expertise to say, you know what? I have this like process that drives me nutty. And so if I could get something else to take that on without losing my own authority and my own accountability for it, I think that would be a win. And so we started doing that. And it started off with someone on the team never has worked with macros, never has worked with Excel scripts. They got AI to write an Excel script, uploaded it for a highly manual process on, I think it was like Jobidal or CompuView, something like that, and uploaded it into Excel. It saved them like 2 minutes, but the joy they felt from not having to do that mundane manual work was incomparable. And so that is what kind of started leading other people on to say, oh, you can do it this way. Oh, I can do it this way. I think just listening to people and understanding their context and building the conditions around them to adopt that change is what makes kind of the process easier for adoption and buy-in.
And I love what you said around it is about creating the conditions. That is exactly how you help people feel like you really do see them and that you and I have spoken about that you genuinely care for them and
Absolutely.
care for what does the structure and culture of the organization look like because you're a part of it too. You work in the same organization. But as we sort of talk through it, there is a line, right, between being honest with what you know to be true. So you know that you are rolling out AI with the intention of making the workforce more productive, better, faster, quicker, working on higher leverage work. All of that is true. But you also know that you can't always promise that it's not going to impact them. So, what are some of the lines that you're working through and those barriers when you're being really honest with them to say, I want you to upskill, I want to teach you these things, but I don't entirely know what the outcome is on the other side?
Yeah, that's a hard question and something that we're still figuring out. But I think one of the best ways is being super vulnerable with them. I think leaders sometimes think that they have to have this front of like certainty and we know what's going on. But I think the more vulnerable I have been with my team to say, I'm not sure this thing is smarter than me on these, elements. And I'm not sure what that means for my own role. But what I can tell you is that it's happening and we have to figure out a way to make it work. And so having those dialogues, being really vulnerable, really working with them to figure out that solution so they feel that they're actually leading the way. I can't tell you how much that's helped in driving that momentum. And when we talk about those fine lines of kind of teetering, this is a scary situation. Trust is built on those small moments of vulnerability and showing that you care and you're being honest. And if you can be genuine in those moments, I think that goes a long, long way.
Yeah. And you and I obviously have similar backgrounds in the consulting space where we've sort of learned that creating that genuine thread and connection helps everybody feel like they can move through the change together. And it's being done with what we would typically say is like good intentions, right? And you and I have spoken about this before that when we started in consulting, we had this idea that if you have the right answer and you have good intentions,
Oh,
people
yes.
are going to see it your way and they're going to follow what you tell them to do. Obviously, underpinning this, I'm curious about that learning that you and I have spoke about that we've had to change over time, your experience today, and tell me about, did you have to change that belief and unlearn it, or have you just sort of amended it over time?
No, I have had to really unlearn it as I've been burnt many times. So initially, early in my career, really focused on, okay, I need to get this right. There has to be data to support it. It has to be logical. Like those conditions are met, everybody will follow along. They'll get it. They'll understand what we're trying to do here. And I quickly realized that's not the case. With AI as an example coming into the conversation, I really had to think about what does it mean for others? So the so what, right? And really talking about how we're doing this together, how we're leading together, that it wasn't replacing human judgment, like talking about those things really openly in order to understand the challenges that they were going through, why this was really difficult for them, helping them upskill in an appropriate way, learning that we're not going for perfection, but we're going for a belief that this is actually going to help. And so that is something that I had to really abandon early on, that idea that if I get this correct, everybody will follow and understand, and really focus on at the end of the day, people have to understand what it means for them in their context. And that belief will help us move much further than me trying to constantly push an idea through.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I feel like early in my career, I spent so much time on the intentions and the
Yes.
why of like why we were doing it. And like, quite honestly, that is the most debatable part of any conversation,
Yeah.
right? Like, I am never going to fully know your intentions. You're never going to fully know mine. And when we get stuck there, it never nets out to the response we want, right? When we focus on the actions which are observable that can be taken, and then we look at the impact and effect of those actions, that's what we really need to spend our time on is this is what's going to happen. Here's the outcomes of those things. Everybody can align on what they're seeing. But that backstory of, but I am really right. And I have all the data. And how do you not see it my way? Getting caught in that swirl is just, it's not a productive conversation. And I just didn't, I also was like in the beginning of my career, but why don't you see it this way? We should all see it this way, right?
That's
So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
and so when you think about it, that concept of like being right isn't enough, what do you do instead of that? I mean, you described a little bit of like how you get everybody to focus on other elements, but we talk about leading others through change cross functionally. But is there something that you do when it's your team or it's your directs that help them to really understand that yes, accuracy and data is important, but also there might be something else to focus on in that?
A mentor of mine that you know really well once told me there's two elements to any kind of program that you do. or any work you do. One is obviously getting the work right, making sure it's tight. It's like hygiene, making sure the work is good and of quality. But the second piece is the experience and how people feel around the work. And so that has been a big part of my mantra as I work with my team. So when my team comes to me and they're like, we have done the analysis, this looks perfect, and this is why this leader is going to agree. But how are they going to feel about it? How is this going to like make them react? And those softer kind of conversations around reaction, experience, likability, all of those pieces, we start having more of that instead of spending time on, is this work right? I know you got this right. But how are we creating an experience that they feel like, okay, you hear me, you understand me, we're doing this together. All of the pieces we talked about earlier, Laurie, like that is what I really focus on with my team because that's what moves the needle, not so much as we've learned, the data and the accuracy.
Early in my career, you were the same, like that quote, right? About like, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you made
Or
them
you feel.
feel.
Yeah.
I don't think I really understood it till I got really deep into this work. And you're like, yeah, making them feel like you genuinely care for them and that you understand their context.
Mm.
Can't guarantee the outcomes, but you are holding their hand and you're shoulder to shoulder with them as you go through it. That's actually made the difference to a number of the change efforts. And when we think about the disruption of AI, it is really scary for a number of people. They're on a variety of spots on the continuum of like AI adoption and like forcing it through because you know and you have data. That's not what's going to get them to the other side.
No,
It's making them
no.
feel that you have gone through bit by bit. You really see them. That's really what will get them there.
And a lot of the times, it's not that people don't want to adopt AI. They want to make sure that it's done such that it doesn't threaten their own role. It's done such that it doesn't put them at risk in their job. It's done such that the appropriate governance is helping guide them. Like, so it's really understanding what conditions they require in order to be successful doing this as well, right? And if they're too busy, how do you make room and space for it? If they don't understand it, how do you give them the right opportunities, learning opportunities? It's those kind of pieces. And you can only do that if you're listening to them and understanding the emotional side of it, right?
And, you know, one of the things we do on the impact list is we like to talk about somebody who's helped shape you because even though we can say, yes, we are the sum of the experiences, some of those experiences we've had are because others opened the door or others created space. I'm curious, you've told me that your mom is somebody who shaped you and whose story, you know, you share. So tell me a bit more about her when you think about your leadership journey and how you lead today.
It's so funny when you say that back to me, I get goosebumps. And it happens every time I talk about my mom, which seems cheesy, but it's very true. So, my mom, even my dad, came from humble beginnings. And the fact that I'm here today, a huge privilege. And I thank them every day for it. But my mom is the type of person who utilizes friction to create momentum. That kind of personality, that kind of perseverance is something that has been ingrained in me. And so whenever I come across a hard moment, especially with these hairy problems that we face and are given, it is so important to have that ability, that perseverance to say, how am I going to take this situation and make it work for me? And so that has been one of the pieces that she's gifted to me. Another thing is that she is forever, she's talked to me about how learning and education is such an important part of every person. And that's what takes you to the next level, that voracious curiosity. And so that has also been ingrained in me. And so even though over a decade into my career, learning about different experiences, different transformation programs, I still seek out opportunities to learn and be curious and ask questions from people because she's given me that gift of you got to keep learning, you got to keep understanding. She's still taking courses. And so that ability to persevere paired with this insatiable curiosity, that is truly what's probably shaped my foundation and has kind of gotten me to where I needed to be and what I've given to my kids, hopefully, into the future.
You know, as we kind of like look forward, when all of this is behind you and knowing how much your mom shaped you and how your move from consulting into more industry, there you're always in those transformations, in those hard rooms, in tiered teams. There's so much complexity through that. And you've got this great foundation. of your mom and the leaders that you've had. You mentioned earlier a mentor. When people talk about what it was like to be led by you through all of the change, what would you want them to say further down the road?
Two things. The first would be that I cared about what they were going through and how they went through it. And the second would be that they've learned something from working with me. Whether it's something really small or something really big, I want to make sure that they've taken away a small thing from working with me. And so I hope that that's what my teams would say about me and those that I work with, the peers that I've worked with.
And it's sort of twofold, right? It's like, that's what the working with you is like. And then if we kind of turned it to your family, which I know is so important to you, if we were to ask your kids, fast forward many years, if we were to ask them, what would you want them to know about you as a working mom who was inspired by your mom and has had all this great opportunity? What would you want them to take away as your legacy?
I think, honestly, the same things that I cared and they were able to learn something from me, whether it was small or big. One thing that I've really focused on and I was really intentional about is to showcase that I'm more than just mom, that I'm multidimensional. I talked to them last night about doing this podcast. I talked to them about the course that I was doing recently. And I share those experiences and those stories because I want them to know that mom's not just the one that cooks and cleans and drives you over to baseball practice, but she's also the one that is doing all these other things. And I want them to know that a woman, having three boys, a woman is so much more than just a caregiver. And that's been really important to me as I kind of speak to them and share things with them.
I totally agree with you. Even as I'm building out my practice too, it's helping my kids to know we're in this really supportive journey together. But again, I am somebody who also does more than just the laundry, and that's possible. And I think also that whatever they dream they can do it. So
Absolutely.
I completely agree with you. It's that they're cared for, they can take away those life lessons, and that we've got each other's backs. We're in this like team unit together. So it totally resonates with me as well. Obviously, you've gone through a number of these transformations, changes. You've got so much excitement ahead of you. If the listeners found something in your conversation that they want to reach out and know a little bit more, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me. People always comment on how quickly I respond. So definitely reach out. I love having these conversations and hearing different stories. It's how I learn as well. So I welcome it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing a little bit about your journey and what's been important to you. I can't wait to see where the next things take you.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks for listening to The Impact List. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, subscribe for more grounded, honest discussions with leaders who are figuring it out in real time. And if this episode would help someone you know, pass it along. This is your reminder to lead clearly, stay human, and focus on what actually matters.